Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lusk. I'm at home on a Tuesday night. This ought to be fun, unless we get kicked out of here. So let's just talk a little bit about ponds and lakes and fish and plants and whatever you guys want to talk about. Bring some questions. I thought I'd start off tonight. Actually, Leanne gave me the topic. She told me what I was going to talk about because she's been getting some emails over the transom there at Pond Boss and some phone calls, and people are talking about what a weird summer we've had. You know, it's not that every summer is the same and every summer is predictable, but like I went and took a look at a lake earlier this week. I guess it was on Saturday, where last year the guy had a horrific blue-green algae bloom, but he kind of figured out how to mitigate it. So he did that. He did some management strategies, and this year it's a whole lot better than it was last year. There's John Dyer checking in, and you know what, John? Thanks for that reminder. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section. Click like. Share this to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for whatever Leanne at the Pond Boss office says that she's got some of. Whether it's going to be a hat, we got shirts and stuff. Hey, Jeremy Day gets to watch. He's not at a track meet or at school. Or Jeremy's a teacher, coach, just another stellar human, just like John Dyer is over in the Carolinas. Jeremy's down in the Houston area, Navasota, Montgomery area, and they both have ponds. So, do the hashtag Pond Boss Magazine, click like, share this to your timeline, and you're eligible for a drawing whenever Leanne pulls it off. So, we're going to be doing that here before long, I'm sure, because it's been a month or so. Hey, Bill Shrum, good to see you, buddy. So last week, I got to go to the Texas A&M Range, Wildlife, and Fisheries Management Department's convocation. Had a reception on Tuesday night, which is where I was, and then on Wednesday they had a convocation. And you know, like a lot of folks, I've been kind of, hello Ron Chrisman, checking in from Michigan, south of Grand Rapids. Got to go see Ron back here not long ago. There's Danny Mack. A wet year for us, yeah. Just about 24 inches. We get mist off in the hill. The hill we're on deflects storms from all directions. And you know, if anybody knows how that works, Danny Mack knows how that works. I'll get to see Danny Mack at the upcoming Bob Lusk Pond Boss Institute of Higher Pondology. We're almost sold out on that deal. But we're going to go work on, you know, Jimmy Houston's lakes. So who wouldn't want to go do that and spend some time with Jimmy Houston? It's going to happen October 23, 24, 25. I think we might be able to squeeze in 2 more people. You won't be staying at the ranch. You'll be staying at a hotel, which means you'll have to commute 20 minutes, which it's still worth it. But we're going to have a big time. Hello, Kenny Sanderson. Good to see you, buddy. Kenny's over in northwestern Kansas, about as northwest in Kansas as you can get. So I thought I'd talk about summer because, you know, a substantial amount of the country has received excess rain, comparatively speaking. Well, you think that's a good thing. And in most cases it is. But when you talk to Sarah Parvin over at the Slab Lab, killed every fish that she had. You know, I say that. It killed almost every fish that they had. They're going to have to be starting over. You know, and then, but when you look at it, when you get those rains in the summertime on top of a pond that's fairly stable, you know, like Charles Heurig over there in Princeton, Indiana, you know, yeah, Kenny, I need an education. Kenny, you can give an education. But, you know what, the cool thing about the Institute of Higher Pondology, not only is the curriculum and the hands-on stuff, but it's the networking. You know, we're going to have at least 20 people. I think we're going to have 25 people at this one, which will be the biggest one yet. And the network of people is going to be astonishing. I've talked to most of the folks, and I got a few more to talk to, and it's going to be a stellar event. And we have there's Greg McMillan. I was just talking about Greg. I just did not name Greg McMillan. So Greg last summer had a blue-green algae bloom. Hey, Greg. Cheers. Pretty tasty. Greg is probably one of the most avid students of pond management that I've met. For a lay person, which I think lay person is kind of a lousy term to use, he knows as much about managing a pond, mosquito in my office, as anybody that I've met. I mean, he's digging down into the science as deep as he can get. You got it. But last year he had this blue-green algae bloom. So he's really proactive. Greg, I'm talking about you, Greg. Talking about you. You got 2.5 pond north of Argyle, Texas, near Bartonville, Texas. He keeps it topped off with a well. The well is high pH, high alkalinity. The soils are high alkalinity. He's feeding pretty heavily. And Jeremy and John, I will get to your questions here in a minute. But I want to tackle Greg for a minute. And so Greg has figured out that he's got to pay attention to his water. So what he's done essentially is he's figured out ways that he can aerate the water safely using bottom diffused aeration, circulation. He's even got a couple of sump pumps set up. I didn't even think to ask you, Greg. When I set up a sump pump over a bridge like what you did, I set it in a bucket. And I filled a bucket full of holes. Of course, when the bucket's underwater, it doesn't matter. And he's moving his water. He understands you got to move the water. He also added tilapia to help graze the algae and convert a bunch of that algae mass into flesh, which then in turn turns around and feeds your fish. So Greg McMillan has figured out that he's got to really drill in on the water quality piece. And he's doing that. But he's also feeding the fish pretty heavily because he wants to sustain more fish than a pond can typically handle. So his number one objective is to pay close attention to his water chemistry. So I emailed late last night. I had a late night, which I don't keep any hours. All you guys that own a business like Greg does, you don't keep any hours. You do what you do. Do what you need to do, and you do what you want to do, and here we are. But he's going to be digging into analyzing what's going on with the biology of his water. I connected him up with Landon Wyatt at Natural Lakes and Aquafix, where they do the water analysis. Sometimes they'll do soil analysis, and then they come up with a kind of a prescription for beneficial microbes, enzymes, and different treatments to help expedite the breakdown of decaying organic matter. So I can't wait to hear what they say. And Landon has told me that he's going to come to the Institute of Higher Pondology, either him or Patrick. Patrick used to work for Vertex. He is a water chemistry guru. Both of them are. And both those guys are coming to the Institute of Higher Pondology. And I didn't really even talk about that with you, Greg. I mean, you're leap years ahead of a lot of what we do at the Institute, but that might be something you want to look at, especially with the water chemistry piece. So Jeremy Day says, when do bass really hit a growth spurt? I'm going to tell you exactly when bass hit a growth spurt. They're going to hit a growth spurt starting right now until about the second or third week of December in your part of the planet. Now, if we're talking about John Funk or Charles Heurig over in Princeton, Indiana, then the growth spurt's going on right now in Indiana, and where Ron Krisman is up in Michigan. That growth spurt's going to go until probably the first week of November or so. And of course, now up there where Krisman is, where Ron is, he's working on smallmouth bass. So his smallmouth bass thing, those fish are going to have a growth spurt all the way up until December because they're cool water fish. So your growth spurts are going to occur starting about right now. We've had a few cool days, and when you get those cool days, the water temperature starts to mitigate, get down into the 70s. That's when we get the growth spurts. We'll back up here, make sure I'm not missing anything. My new bass are getting bigger, but not as big as most of the bluegill. Well, here's the deal about that. Bluegills can handle warmer water than bass can. While bass are having a tendency to want to just not die, bluegill are thriving. Bluegill, they can handle warm water, and they can grow really, really, really fast. So it's there's kind of a rhythm where your bluegill now have reproduced to their max. Your fathead minnows in Jeremy's case, bluegill, red ear sunfish, and he's got other species of fish in there they don't really want. Your bass, now they're in line. They're lined up. And they're going to be the next ones to get the growth spurts, because what happens in nature is these fish really want to pop. They want to blow up. They want to gain as much weight. Like, let's just take Greg McMillan, for example. He's got threadfin shad, tilapia, bluegill, red ear sunfish. He's even got some mussels in there. They're not going to contribute a whole lot to the food chain, but they're contributing to the health of the pond. When you've got 4 different species of forage fish in a pond or a lake like what Greg's got, they've reproduced all summer. They've grown up to 2 or 3 inches in size. They're perfect nuggets. They're perfect pieces of the food chain for when the temperature, as it begins to fall and get into that prime operating temperature, the bass are just going to grow like crazy. And what will happen next, like in Greg's pond where he's got tilapia, and Bay Miltonberger, if Bay's watching, he knows this too. He's got threadfin shad, he's got tilapia, he's got gizzard shad, he's got bluegill, red ear, green sunfish. He's got a virtual plethora of bait fish. His bass are going to grow like crazy from now until the second or third week of December. So let's see here. I'm going to follow back through with Jeremy's question here. When do bass really hit a growth spurt? Now until in south central Texas, southeast Texas, where you are, until the second or third week of December. They will grow like crazy. When the mouths get big enough to eat more sizes of bluegill, okay, so I see where you're going. Their mouth is always big enough to eat whatever you're growing. Because keep in mind, a 4-inch bluegill can't get to 4 inches unless it's 3 inches. It can't get to 3 unless it's 2. So if you've got bass in there that are feeding, they're going to be eating fish that size. John Funk, man, I hate it, but he's one of the ones that had issues with fish kills. Now, John's was winterkill. So for those of you that don't really understand what winterkill is, winterkill happens when a pond ice is over. Now, in Texas, Louisiana, heck, parts of Oklahoma, all through the southeast, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, part of the Carolinas. The only time you guys ever see ice is in a glass of tea. In northern tier states like Michigan, where John Funk and Ron Frisman live, they have this deal called winter. Here in Texas, Greg McMillan, Jeremy, all my buddies, Danny Mac, all those guys, we have this thing called summer. So what happened to John Funk was when you get this big thick layer of ice, it stops photosynthesis. Most ice is not clear. Most ice is cloudy. And then when you put a layer of snow on top of it, it totally interferes with photosynthesis, which stops oxygen production in ponds. So as fish and plants are consuming oxygen under the ice, the water can get to the point where all the oxygen has been consumed, and whatever has to have oxygen to live will die. And that's what happened to John Funk. And his golden shiners, and John is like 76 years old, which is older than me. Not much. But, now you're going to have to wait to grow more channel catfish, more bass, more bluegills, and all that kind of stuff. Hello, Fred Bingaman. Good gosh, good to see you, buddy. Fred Bingaman is a long-time friend. We've had some really, really fun times together. Okay, John Dyer says, you asked us. No, let's back the truck up on that. Leanne asked us to stump the boss. I read that and I started to delete it. Woodford. Considering the Brazos River's unique geomorphology, specifically the variable salinity gradients of its lower estuary and the periodic high flow events upstream? How does the osmoregulatory capacity of the blue catfish population in the middle Brazos, which is genetically isolated from its coastal counterparts, differ in terms of its ability to tolerate? You son of a bitch, you went to AI to hit me with this. Okay, y'all might need to interpret this for me. I know she put that I'm in 2 halls of fame, which I am. Hall of Fame happens to you when you just don't freaking quit. Then they got to recognize you when you get old. Okay, so blue cat, how does it, osmoregulation in fish is their ability for their cellular structures to manage salt content versus freshwater content. Genetically isolated from its coastal counterparts, differ in terms of its ability to tolerate sudden shifts in connectivity and what is the precise physiological and genomic mechanism that allows this adaptation to persist despite the lack of strong selective pressure from chronic salinity. Okay, I can actually answer that question. You and I are going to have a talk, John Dyer. So here's the way that works. The salinity content does not drop drastically anywhere in the middle part of the Brazos River. So there's the upper Brazos River, where the salinity is considerably higher. They have this area there, John Dyer, called the Salt Fork of the Brazos River, which has, drum roll please, salt. So when you get down to the middle part of the Brazos River, with higher flow events, the conductivity drops by about half, but it doesn't drop immediately. It drops slowly. So the fish's ability to osmoregulate is not abrupt. It happens over a span of 5, 6, 7, 8 days, maybe 10 days, because the salt is not diluted immediately. It's diluted slowly. So the precise physiological and genomic mechanism is the cells, the intracellular water has the ability to extract itself through osmoregulation and osmosis through the cell walls. So, dude, you got to come up with a little bit better question than that. So, chronic salinity in these parts, you can't taste it. And maybe you can. I can't taste it. But the thing about the salinity of the Brazos River is, even though the connectivity is fairly high, comparatively speaking, to freshwater systems, it's not high compared to when you get down around coastal areas, like over off the coast of the Carolinas. So, it's not that big a change. And they can osmoregulate because it's not a dramatic change. It happens over a span of time. It drops slowly. So, even though those Ictalurus furcatus, which I've not caught a blue cat yet in our stretch of the Brazos River, and I've caught some catfish in this part of the river, those fish are not going to have any issues because that's going to be downstream of Lake Whitney. There's 3 lakes on the Brazos River: Possum Kingdom, Granbury, and Whitney. And where you're talking about is down below Lake Whitney. It's going to change so slowly that it's not that big a deal. Good question. I'm going to have a talk with Leanne about these questions. John Harson, my F1 tiger bass I put in May were about 2 inches. I caught one last weekend, it was about 8 inches. Okay, you put those in May. Okay, let me think about that. May, June, July, August. 8 inches. I'm going to tell you 8 inches is probably fairly typical. Maybe an 8-inch bass may be just above the growth trend typically. Hello, Todd Austin. I'm pretty sure they were spawning last week. I bet you're talking about bluegills there, John. Brent Regary, I'm going to catch my bass to put in my pond next fall. My pond is 0.75 acres with 52 20-year-old cypress trees in the pond on the lake. How many 2 to 3 pounders should I put in there? I have 2,000 half-pound brim in there right now. Okay, Brent. How many 2 to 3 pound bass? Do you know the genetics? Are you confident of them? Do you know how old the bass are? So here's the way I'm going to look at that. I would not do it that way. But since you asked the question that way, I'm going to answer it for you. How many 2 to 3 pound bass should you put in a 3/4 acre pond? 10. No more than 15. Actually, yeah, 10 to 15. Now, here's what to expect. Don't put in fewer than 10, no more than 15. And here's the way I'm going to explain that. Some of those fish, well, all of them are going to reproduce. And if you're putting in 2 to 3 pounders, most of those are going to be girls. There's only going to be a percentage of them that will thrive. Not all of them are going to thrive. Some will, some won't. But the main objective by stocking those fish is for them to reproduce, inject some good genetics. Be sure you know what the genetics are, because the baby fish that come off of these fish that you stock are going to be the ones that thrive and create the fishery for long term. These 2 to 3 pound bass that you move into that pond are not going to be the ones that are going to be the fish that will become the giants. Here's where I'm going with that. A fish that grows up in that environment and you catch it out of that environment and you put it in this environment, they're not necessarily going to thrive because they grew up over there. See, fish don't have the cognitive ability to be able to think through environmental situations. They act based on instinct and conditioning. So, and that's a conversation that I had with our good buddy Greg McMillan the other day. He got fish from Camelot Bell, which that's a topic for another night. But those fish are pure string Florida bass that originated from Ron Slay from Ocala Fisheries over in Florida Fish Farms over in Ocala, Florida. So he's got good genetics, but that doesn't mean that the fish that grew up at Camelot Bell are going to thrive in a 2.5 acre pond or a 2 acre pond, in Argyle, Texas. Same with yours, Brent. Some of those are going to survive, some are going to thrive, some are going to deteriorate. But a good number of them are going to reproduce. So if you're putting in 2 to 3 pounders, they're probably mostly females. Be sure you get a boy. Hello, Taylor Shrum. Danny Max got it. John Henry. John Funk. Yes, I am older. I know. 76. I'm 70. You're 76. Hey, there's John Big Frog Wilson, Aqueduct. Hey, John, you made the cover of the September-October Pond Boss magazine. One of those photographs that we shot over there at your running buddy's place over there at Chesterfield. That photo made the cover. The layout guy was thrilled with it. So, John, good to see you, buddy. Okay, John Dyer, I will take that accolade. And you and I are going to be talking here in a few days. Christopher Aguilard. Well, look at there. There's my good friend John Cherry Holmes. Yes, we are on live. I am on live. And John is a good friend of ours from out here at Pecan Plantation. It looks like he is surfing the internet on the Pond Boss Facebook page. Christopher Aguilard. Boudin King over there in South L.A., Louisiana. Jeremy Day, weird question. I have a little creeping primrose in my pond. Given the water level, I would have thought it would have thrived. It's scattered around the pond, but definitely not thriving. In fact, it looks like some of it's dying. Is it possible the water I have just isn't conducive to that type of plant? I'm thankful it's not thriving, but I am a little curious why. Does that plant? No, that plant does not need any depth at all. It needs no depth. It just needs edge cover. It needs topsoil and moisture. So if your pond's going up and down and fluctuating some, that's what keeps primrose from becoming invasive. So primrose is pretty common down around Montgomery, Navasota area. John Cherry Holmes, he's kind of playing with me there. John, so glad we're friends, buddy. Yep. All right, here we go. Joel Danauer. Hey, hello, Bob. Hope you're well. I am. Goal is to. So Big Frog, take a look at what Bay's saying, chiming in with. Goals to make the centerfold, not the cover. Well, we only put calendars on the centerfold. Hey, Pond Boss Magazine, everybody, $35 a year. You know what I'm going to say next. Say it with me out loud so everybody can hear it. Cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. Yep, you know what? Everybody that subscribes to Pond Boss, I say everybody, I get one of the most common comments I get from people that subscribe to Pond Boss Magazine is that they love the little nuggets. Everybody gets a nugget. So this is kind of weird because I'm in charge of this magazine. I publish it and I write a fair amount of it. But here's the way that works. Each issue comes out every other month, $35, pretty cheap. Great advertisers, great products. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. $35. It really is cheaper than a Friday night date, and it's going to last a year. So it's kind of hard not to subscribe to Pond Boss. But here's the way it works. When I sit down to put it together, it takes about 5 hard days of total focus to put all the articles together. And what I typically do, most magazines have a calendar where they're looking a year out, a year and a half out. I don't do that. I look at what's going on for the upcoming season. When my writers, I've got a stable of writers, and when they submit their work, I read what they write, and then I try to look around their topics and come up with something that's appropriate for that issue, for that weather, for that season, for that time of year. And that's how that works. So, I try to design these articles so that you can get some meat out of each one, at least enough to be able to help you do something with your ponds. Birddogit.com. Check that out. That's my son, Jonathan. And for the sake of transparency, since transparency is a big deal in today's world, Jonathan, about 4 years ago, he called me and he says, "Hey, Dad, listen." And I've got 4 kids, and Jonathan is, and they're all great. I'm saying that in case they're watching. I love you, kids. So the thing about Jonathan is he is high energy, and he's ambitious, but not to the point where it's detrimental. Where he came up with an idea 4 years ago. So Jonathan, he was born in 1981. No, that's right, 81. So he's 40, coming up on 44 years of age, and he's raising kids. He's got a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and like a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, something like that. I lose track of all their ages. And he said, "Dad, I really want to get the boys out hunting." He's got 2 boys and a little girl. Well, that little girl can whip the asses of those boys. They're pretty fierce. So Jonathan says, "I got an idea, Dad." 4.5 years ago. This was January of 4.5 years ago. And he says, I don't have time for a lease. Plus, hunting leases in today's world, the liability is too high. You got to manage and maintain fences. You got to keep the feeders full. You got to keep your camp up. You've got to work with the agencies on managing the numbers, and then you got to buy feed. You got to take care of the landowner, the lessor, all that. He says, or I can book through a guide or an outfitter, and you got to book a year out, and then if you're wanting to take your kids hunting, and by the time you get there, if they're sick, you're not going. So you've lost your money on that deal. He says, or you got to have a friend with a ranch. What do you think about an idea of creating a VRBO or an Airbnb for hunting? And I said, "Jonathan, dude, I think that's a great idea." So that's how Bird Dog gets started. And he's expanded into some services, tax credits. Jonathan has a finance background. And he's taken that model and using it with birddogit.com to help work with sophisticated landowners. And you don't have to be that sophisticated, but helping them figure out how they can get some tax credits, how to improve the land. It's a pretty interesting concept, and he's figuring out what his niches are. David Schneiderman, haven't seen him tonight. David is Easy Docks of Texas. Easy Docks of Texas. Check him out. Of course, I can't go through one of these shows without talking about Purina Mills. Been working with Purina Mills since 1995, of all things. Holy cow, that's what, 30 frickin' years. Helping them design better feeds and trying to figure out how we can get. Oh, I just got a blurb where I got a Teams meeting. Okay, good for me. You know, but Purina Mills, I love their fish food. Hoping they can get their business model in order. Get those feeds out there in front of more people. Texas Hunter Products. I haven't seen Chris Blood check in yet. But you know what? At the next Institute of Higher Pondology, Cody Borgfield is going to be there. He's been working for Texas Hunter for a long, long time. He is one of their go-to guys. He's way up the food chain. And he'll be there to talk a little bit about Texas Hunter products. Who else have I got? I'll think of it in a minute. Let me go see. Let's go back up there and look at some of these questions. Bill Schrum. Greg McMillan. Okay, let's see what Greg's got. Bay wants to make the cover. I should have shot some photos of you popping a rattlesnake the other day. I could have put that in the centerfold. Watching Bay poised over about a 4-foot rattlesnake that had a rat in its belly or something. I didn't want to mess around and cut that snake open, which I kind of regret that now. Bay busted a diamondback rattlesnake in the driveway next to his house, which, you know, most of the time we let rattlesnakes go, but not when they're next to the house. You know, and that thing, oh my gosh, it was that big around in his gut, and it was shaped either like a small child or well, not like a small child. I said that out loud. I thought it. I shouldn't have said it. But probably a rat. And it would have been cool to cut it open and take a look at it. And that would have made a great centerfold with a calendar. Bay Miltonberger. Greg McMillan, when setting my circulator in 8 feet of water, at what depth should I set it? 3 feet. Do I adjust the depth based on time of year? No. Your circulator is rated at 125 feet. Set it at 3 feet. 3 feet and shoot it. So the circulator, okay, there's a couple of kinds of circulators. Kasco Marine is one of the Pond Boss sponsors and advertisers. I love those guys. Kasco Marine, here's a little throwback so you guys will understand that. Kasco Marine was started way, way, way back, I think in the 70s, because if you put a dock in the Great Lakes region or anywhere in the north and it freezes in, when ice starts to thaw, it starts moving and it shreds your dock. So what the idea then was with Kasco Marine was to build these devices that look like an underwater fan that you can set at the depth you want, and the fan kicks on and stirs the water around the dock to keep the dock from freezing in so it doesn't get torn up when the ice begins to thaw. So these circulators, there's two kinds of circulators. One of them is this fan type. Another one is kind of a low profile fountain. When I say low profile, maybe 6 inches, 8 inches, where the water is picked up and then circulated, you know, horizontally out away from the circulator. Where the underwater fans create like a lazy river effect. It's creating circulation. 8:04, and I'm getting sleepy. So, setting your circulator, Greg, I'd set it in water 3 to 4 feet. Do not adjust the depth. Set it at that depth and leave it. Okay, Bill Shrump. I've been diligently, as in regularly, as in methodically, Bill Shrump, taking temperatures in my pond at all depths. It's always the same from top to bottom. We don't have any windbreak, and being in northwest Oklahoma, we have lots of wind. Is the wind adequate solution to aeration for my situation? I realize it is until it doesn't below. You know, they don't have a centerfold, which is boring me. I guess now I need to do that. You know, it's really interesting. Most ponds stratify, except those that are really, really shallow. And I happen to know that Bill Shrum's ponds are pretty shallow. So wind in your area is adequate for aeration unless you've got more consumption of oxygen than you have aeration to supply the air you need or the oxygen you need. So here's what that means. That means if you've got a heavy-duty plankton bloom or a really thick plant mass or lots of fish that are consuming oxygen, you're going to be fine. So let's scroll down here a little bit. Let me see here. 17 viewers, 41 comments, 16 reactions, 6 shares. That's encouraging. Jeremy Day, my water used to be very dirty. It's now much clearer. The bluegill are mostly dull looking because of the watercolor as they were growing. Now that the watercolor is clearing, will they change colors? They will change colors. They actually will. They will change colors. Hello, Jim Allen. So Jim Allen is working with Hakim. Hey, you know what? That reminds me. When you guys get a minute, we're uploading some videos into the Pond Boss YouTube channel. Now, when I get a few minutes, I'll share those on the Facebook page. Another one popped up yesterday. I can't remember which one it is, but we've got some really, really good YouTube videos coming up where Chico and I have worked together to create some pretty dadgum good content. One of those is going to be a bathymetry map, which we talked about. Bay, your bathymetry map. We shot a video up there in your man cave, which is the man cave of all man caves, where the rattlesnake was a couple days ago, Saturday. Danny Mack said, hello, Brian Nutt. Danny Mack, why sit there right at 3 or 4 feet? 3 to 4 feet, 4 to 5 feet off the 8 foot. Oh, because you want to move that water horizontally and make it contact the atmosphere. So the more the water can contact the atmosphere, the more it can release its gases, the more it can absorb the oxygen levels that it needs. You know, where we don't really care about the water below about 4 feet. We care about the water that's 4 feet or shallower, because that's the most productive water in a pond like what Greg's got. Now, Greg's got both horizontal circulation and he's got vertical circulation with his diffusers. But when it comes to using those circulators to move it like a lazy river, you can move a higher volume of water in the shallower water and allow it to contact the atmosphere than you can if you drop it down to 6 or 7 feet. If you drop it down 6 or 7 feet and you have a circulator going with that fan, it will not allow the water to come up and communicate with the surface. And you've got to have that communication at the surface for the water to be able to do what it does to transfer gases. That's a big, big deal. Pregnant pause. Absorb that. Danny Mac, you know what? I love you, dude. You are, for you guys that do not know, Daniel McWhirter is a frickin' nuclear physicist. The guy's a true rocket scientist. I don't know how in the hell, I mean, that guy, he knows things that nobody knows. I mean, he can calculate it, he can extrapolate, he can matriculate. All those 8 numbers, that guy's got it. He can. He dude's a stud. John Harrison, did you say it was okay to dye the pond in the fall? If so, pros and cons of doing it, when to do it, if so. Well, so here's what happens with pond dyes. Pond dyes essentially block the UV rays of the sun from penetrating down into the water column. So let's do it like this. The best time to not dye a pond is when you really want to have a good plankton bloom. You want to have a good plankton bloom to do 2 things. One, you want to have a good plankton bloom to prevent sunlight penetration to the bottom, to push back the growth times of aquatic plants. And secondly, you want to create a food chain to grow the bait fish that you need. So here's what I'm talking about there. So when a bluegill first hatches, 12,000 of them weigh a pound. But all they are is two little eyeballs and a little thin piece of their body and the yolk of the egg. And as soon as they absorb the egg yolk, they have to have food or they're going to starve to death. If they don't eat within 30 minutes of absorbing the yolk of what used to be their egg, they're going to die. They have to have some energy. So they get that, and if you think about it, a newly hatched baby fish, how big is its mouth? Smaller than the head of a pin, like a third the size of the head of a pin. And for all you young people, a pin is this little pointy thing that seamstresses use. So, where am I going with that? Don't use dye when you need a plankton bloom. So in the fall, your plankton bloom has pretty well served its purpose. Your bait fish have reproduced. They're growing to their maximum rates. And if you want to use pond dye, I can't think of a good reason to use pond dye in the fall, because by that time, you've either got a plant problem or you don't. You've had plankton growth. If you want to use pond dye in the fall, so the pros of using pond dye in the fall is you can pretty well effectively take out a plankton bloom going into the winter. And if you do that, then you're going to minimize the risk. I can't say minimize. You're going to decrease the risk of having winter kill. So I think in northern tier ponds, using dye in the fall could be a helpful thing, because you knock out some algae and knock out some plankton blooms, kind of set the stage to decrease the risk of winter kill from oxygen depletion. So the pros, what's the pros? Well, there's your pros right there. You can minimize the risk or decrease the risk of winter kill if you use a dye. Now, I don't want to take that totally to the bank, because there are some caveats to that. It's going to be based on how fertile the water is, what the plant communities are like. If you have dense plant communities in the northern tier ponds, up in Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, up where John is, it's kind of a toss-up. I don't want to give like a non-answer, but I'm not opposed to using dyes in northern tier states. Brian Nutt, I've had a bad algae bloom since July. I logged in a few weeks ago to ask about spraying it, and you suggested to hold off, which I have. Bloom is still there. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, just like Jim Allen is. Should I do anything after it dies off to get ahead of it before the spring? You know what? It kind of depends on what the algae bloom's like. If it's a blue-green algae bloom, then we need to talk about it. We need to figure out what it is so you can figure out how to mitigate that. There we go, Jim Allen. Here we go. That's it. I don't think it's a bad idea to get ahead of it in the spring, but there's some techniques that you kind of got to figure out how to get ahead of it. I love me some Danny Mac. We got a slushy machine. You're going to bring it to the Institute of Higher Pondology. You have to calculate the alcohol to add to stay below 16%, 32 proof. Love having a pina colada slush right now. That's pretty funny. Yep, there you go. Okay, Danny Mac, he's an engineer. That's got corrected. Dude, you're a nuclear physicist engineer to me. You're like an amazing guy. So here we go. Jim Allen and Brian Nutt are having a conversation. Hello, Elena and Chuck, Daddy. I know you guys had a slight fish kill, but you've had that before and you figured out how to mitigate it. I remember not that long ago, maybe it was 7 or 8 years ago, 3 years ago, 1 year ago, hell, I don't remember, where you ran down to Home Depot and you bought a pump so you could lift some the water up and move it. It's so fun. All right, Kenny Sanderson. 3 days, walleye and several fish have a mouth-to-body length ratio than a large. Okay, well that's a good little factoid to know. All right, guys, it's 8:15. We're rocking and rolling. We haven't been kicked off. Haven't pushed any goofy buttons to take us out. So I think that we kind of ran out of questions. So I'm going to line it up here. We do have 2 or 3 more slots left at the Institute of Higher Pondology if you're interested. Just send me an email. And if you guys are interested in, if you want the spreadsheet to track bass growth rates, send me an email. Just send it to info@pondboss.com, and I'll take care of that. Gosh, I don't know what else to tell you. I really appreciate you guys checking in and hanging out and watching this show, because it's not always easy to be here and do it, but it's always worth it. So we've been rocking and rolling 46 minutes and 14 seconds. So I think I'm going to knock off, call it a day. I'm not sure I'll be next Tuesday because I never know. I don't live a routine. I never know where I'm going to be. But next Tuesday, I'm hoping I'm going to be hanging out with you. So until then, adios for now.